Environment variables are one of the simplest mechanisms for inter-process communication. Let's discuss some of the most commonly used system variables that are predefined for use by many programs. The most basic ones are user is username. Home is the home directory. Shell is the user's home shell. PS1 for shell-like or C-shell-like shells is the primary shell prompt, printed interactively to standard output. PS2 is a secondary prompt that is used interactively to standard output when a line feed is entered in an incomplete command. All those variables are more or less self-explanatory, but some commonly used variables are not that simple, especially in terms of security and usability. Path is a list of directories to look for when executable files searching. The origin of this idea comes from the Multics projects. This is a colon separated list of directories. The C shell path is initialized by setting the variable path with a list of space-separated directory names enclosed in parentheses. As you probably know, on Windows you have the same environment variable, but with fields separated by semicolons. But this is not only the difference between Unix-like and Windows paths. On Windows, you have a default directory to search for executable files, the current directory. But on Unix or Linux, not. But why? It seems so useful. And long ago, it was normal to have a path that started with dot, the current directory. But let's imagine this situation. A user with a name, for example, bad guy, has downloaded many movies in his home directory to your university lab computer and filled up an entire disk. You are a very novice sysadmin and do not know about disk quotas or any other magic for limiting disk space usage, but you know how to run disk analyzer to find the source of the problem. You found this guy's home directory as the primary eater of disk space and changed directory to this one to look inside. And you call the standard command ls for listing of files or directories in bad guy's home directory. But he's a really bad guy. He created an executable named ls in his home directory and wrote in it only one command. Which means remove all files and directories in entire file system starting from the root directory without any questions and confirmations. This guy cannot do it himself, since he, as an ordinary user, has no rights to do this. But he destroys the entire file system with your hands, the super user's hands of sysadmin. Because of this, it is a bad idea to include a dot in your search path, especially if you are super user. IFS, input field separator. The IFS variable can be set to indicate what characters separate input words. By default, space, tab, or new line. This feature can be useful for some tricky shell scripts. However, the feature can cause unexpected damage. By setting IFS to use /sign as a separator, an attacker could cause a shell file or program to execute unexpected commands. Fortunately, most modern versions of the shell will reset their IFS value to a normal set of characters when invoked. So, the term variable. Term is the type of terminal used. The environment variable term should normally contain the type name of terminal, console or display device type you are using. This information is critical for all text grid-oriented programs. For example, text editor. There are many types of terminals developed by different vendors, from the invention of full-screen text terminals in the late of 16th to the era of graphical interfaces in the middle of 80s. It doesn't look very important now, but in some cases when you use one or another tool to access a Unix Linux system remotely, you may have strange problems. In most cases, access to the text interfaces is used, for example, via SSH, Telnet, or serial line, since it requires less traffic. But in some combinations of client programs and server operating systems, you may see completely inappropriate behavior of full-screen text application, such as a text editor. This could be incorrect display of the editor screen, or incorrect response, the keystrokes, and this is a consequence of incorrect terminal settings. The easiest way for solve this problem is to set the term variable. Just try setting them to type ANSI or VT100, because those are the most commonly used types of terminal emulation on those clients. More information about terminals, screen handling machinery you can find in the Under the Hood Text Terminals Command Set lecture. Other variables related to terminal settings, lines and columns, number of lines to fit on the screen and the number of characters that fit on the column, and the variables related to editing. Editor is default editor because there are many editors for Unix-like systems. Visual line editing mode, some settings to personalize your environments. Length is the language settings. TZ is the time zone, and some examples of application-specific settings. Display points to X Windows Server for connecting graphical applications to the user interface. LPDEST as the default printer. If this variable is not set, system settings are used. Man path is a list of directories to look for when searching for system manual files. Pager is the command used by man program to view something manual pages, for example, and many others.